Well, good morning to you, and welcome to Fox 35 News Plus. I am Garrett Weimer, and we appreciate you joining us on this Thursday morning, live on fox35orlando.com, the Fox 35 News app, and on Fox Local. Fox 35 Storm Team meteorologist Brooks Garner is here with me now, and Brooks, we're continuing to track the tropics and starting to get a little bit of a better idea, and it's looking a little different than when we talked this time yesterday.
A major change, kind of unprecedented as far as one of our major computer models doing a total shift, and that's going to totally impact the thinking now for the forecast this weekend for a lot warmer, a lot wetter forecast, I should say, for Florida. It's very warm outside, yes. Heat advisory in effect today. As a side note, we'll get to that in a little bit. It's going to feel like 110. But the heat is on here in the tropics. We've got a tropical wave right now over Puerto Rico and Hispaniola. That includes Dominican Republic and Haiti. And it will be drifting across those tall mountains, staying weak. This is our global radar, satellite-derived product showing all that rain. But, like I said, it's going to stay weak. It's going to be working over these mountains. It's also still embattled with Saharan dust. The next graphic showing that, and the dust keeping it weak. Here's a live view from St. Croix showing the downpours, the heavy clouds, scenes from right under this tropical wave as it heads into the warm waters to the west. But remaining in a weakened state is going to be critically important to determine the track of this system. And with the Saharan dust still present to the north and wrapping around the system, instead of it achieving tropical depression status in the Turks, Caicos, and Bahamas that looked possible yesterday, now it doesn't look like it will achieve that until probably it moves through the Straits of Florida between Miami and Havana and ends up west of the Dry Tortugas, placing it in the Gulf of Mexico, which means that we'll have impacts in the Gulf of Mexico and not on Florida's east coast or the southeast coast of the U.S. directly. So what this means is that we are in line for very heavy rain this weekend. The European model, which was just constantly, every day, every model run saying this will be an Atlantic system, this will be an Atlantic system. It was thinking this would be a lot stronger by the time it got to the Bahamas, now sees that it will be a weaker system, and so now it agrees it'll be a Gulf system. And so the National Hurricane Center today has declared this as an INVEST, that's short for investigation, INVEST 97L. It's a way to identify a tropical wave. And in doing so, it's kind of like a precursor to a tropical depression. We can track it. We can apply spaghetti models. And the spaghetti models this morning, as we put this in motion, take this system west over Cuba and then approach the Tampa Bay region on Monday as a tropical depression, maybe a minimal tropical storm, but this would be a big rainmaker for the Florida region as a whole, where we could get a lot of rain, like over a foot of rain in spots. It's too soon to say. But the alarming part of this model run isn't so much where it's going, but that it's not moving much. Let's advance it one more time, and you'll see it actually does a loop-the-loop. It may go southwest, it may go southeast. What this model indication suggests is that it will likely stall somewhere in the eastern Gulf. It could stall as far north as Cedar Key, as far south as Tampa Bay, or Fort Myers and the Keys. Either way, and this will be determined when it's happening, we're going to have a wide range of rainfall totals east of the system. Somewhere along the peninsula, we could see between 12 and 20 inches of rain by the time it's all said and done for the middle of next week. And all the while, there will be a tornado threat because we'll be on what's called the dirty side of the storm. So periodic downpours. It's not going to rain the whole time. It'll just be raining a lot during that time period with the threat of some isolated severe weather starting Saturday night. So let's go on to the next map and show you some of the other models and some of the other indications with this system. And the system featuring a slow development, but a persistent development. Our global models, we're talking about the GFS and the European model, are all in line now. The green line is that GFS model, all the while forecasting a weaker system that once it enters the Gulf has a chance to develop. GFS model, interestingly enough, actually produces what could be a stronger tropical storm or minimal hurricane as it heads toward the northern Gulf Coast. Either way, that would only enhance the rainfall. European, German, UK model, all kind of in the same group now saying, yep, this will be an eastern Gulf of Mexico system. So while there's great uncertainty as for the timing and the impacts of how much rain, there is growing certainty that we here in the Orlando region and across Florida will get a lot of rain. And a lot of people are watching this not just in Florida, but around the region. So you had mentioned earlier that folks maybe have cruise plans, right? It's going to be really wet this weekend across the Bahamas and across the islands all the way south to the Cayman Islands with this tropical wave.
So what happened between the model runs yesterday and the model runs today that really kind of changed from the outlier that we saw that was kind of taking it into the Gulf side to now all of them seeming to agree?
It's a very good question, a question a lot of folks are asking as well on social social media because they're saying, hey, you guys were talking about an East Coast storm sparing us the effects, and here we are a day later, and then all of a sudden we've got this possibility of a super soaker of a weekend. Well, essentially the philosophy was this. If the storm was to reach tropical depression status when it was passing by the Bahamas, it would get picked up by a trough and pulled north into the Atlantic. So it would be an East Coast storm. If it stayed weaker, it would drift into the Gulf of Mexico before potentially developing into a stronger system. And now, with the combination of the dust, as well as its track taking it over those islands, it looks like it'll stay weaker longer, allowing it to enter the eastern Gulf of Mexico. And now the European model that had been the one that was insistent on an Atlantic storm is now admitting, if you will, that, yeah, it's going to stay weaker. And in doing so, the physics would have it drift into the Gulf of Mexico. It would not get picked up by that trough, and it would be a slow, stalled system. And the other thing to consider is that, the Gulf of Mexico right now is like 87 to 90 degrees. It's bathtub water. And having a system sit over that for days on end is not good as far as the potential for its strengthening. A look at the future clouds and radar, and this isn't attempting to forecast intensity, but just gives you an idea, a broad brush idea on how much rain may be falling. Let's put this in motion. The tropical wave pushes over the islands, stays weak, enters the southeast Gulf of Mexico, and by Saturday we start to see some heavy rain developing across the Keys and South Florida and the southeastern Gulf waters, which then start to work northward as the system itself drifts northward. And if you could picture this kind of spinning in bands of rain falling over the same areas over and over, we could certainly see some spots getting significant rainfall totals. Some of the computer models have forecast as many as 20 to 40 inches of rain, like Hurricane Harvey style rainfall totals. It's too soon to make that determination, but I do want to warn you that on social media, if you're scrolling through X or Facebook, you may see some weather enthusiasts posting all kinds of crazy stuff where we simply don't have the skill in the meteorology yet to make those determinations until essentially with this kind of a system, it's in progress. There's 1,000 solutions. We could get heavy rain. We could get a tropical storm. It may never develop. We may get a hurricane. It may hit Tampa. It may hit Pensacola. It may not hit anybody at all. Everything's on the table, and you're going to see all kinds of crazy solutions of models that are published publicly in those models put on social media. Some people do it for clicks. Other people do it just because they're excited at the idea of what could happen. But just make sure when you look at those, you understand that that's not the actual forecast. The actual forecast will be determined by the National Hurricane Center and by, at the time, the model consensus. This model shows a lot of the heavy rain hanging just offshore. That's totally possible. It may work a little bit farther north. This is that European model, which is made a seismic change from pushing all the rain off the East Coast to now pushing a lot of the rain onto the West Coast and into peninsular Florida.
And let me ask you, too, real quick, you said you kind of expect this to stall.
Yeah.
What is it when you're looking at this that kind of gives you that indication? So
we've got a really stout Bermuda high. That's the big ridge there in the Atlantic. Do you see those lines of equal pressure on the graphic in the Atlantic? Sort of they like curve like a couple C shapes. Those indicate an axis of high pressure that go essentially from Bermuda straight through Savannah, Georgia, and over to New Orleans. And that'll be kind of like a natural barrier to stop this thing from moving very quickly. In other words, the things that the currents in the atmosphere that steer this thing, if you picture it being like a sailboat, are not very strong, and they start wavering, and so it's really going to have trouble making much progress. In fact, it could linger for several days until maybe the middle of next week. A trough of low pressure in the Midwest picks it up and nudges it along. So that would be a considerable concern. And when I was covering Hurricane Harvey, when I was working in Houston in 2017, we had kind of a similar setup of a really juiced up system that just wouldn't budge for 3 days. And we had waves and waves of rain that in some places dumped over 60 inches. I don't see that happening with this system, but I wouldn't be surprised if we had somewhere pick up over 20 inches of rain, and that could lead to some flooding, as you might imagine. But with this map right here, the National Hurricane Center is not producing a cone of forecast yet. There's not the cone saying it's going to go from here to there, but they are illustrating kind of what looks like a cone. It's really a blob, the orange blob, indicating that in this zone, the tropical system, the wave itself located where that X is over the DR, as that pushes into the southeast Gulf or the northern Caribbean or the Straits of Florida, at that point it could become a tropical depression. It may not become a tropical depression until it's off of Tampa or until it's approaching the Nature Coast or the Big Bend of Florida. So there's a lot of uncertainty. And until it gets out of the mountains and becomes a tropical depression, it'll be virtually impossible to make that call. And that's what's frustrating from a forecasting point of view with these homegrown systems that develop in our backyard. We want to be able to produce a neat little forecast package and say you can expect this on this day and this on that day. But when there's more questions than answers, all we can do is really offer you the possibility that we know a stalled system west of our location will produce rounds of heavy rain, and it could produce flooding and tornadoes, and that's what our models are indicating right now. The earliest rain chances forecasting through the middle of next week, 7 to 10 inches in the Tampa Bay region. That could change this afternoon and suddenly set up over the Panhandle or over South Florida. And it might go up from there. It might be 20 inches plus, or it might go down in case that bullseye of rain sets up over the open Gulf of Mexico. So a forecast that is also frustrating for a lot of viewers who are used to us having the answers, right?
Yeah.
But as it goes, this is where things stand. We just have to watch it. Make sure you check in with Fox 35 and Fox Local multiple times a day as we get closer to the system to have a better idea of what we can expect. But I can tell you this, concretely, as we look at the concrete with the rain falling, Gulf of Mexico track is now likely. That will result in periods of heavy rain for Central Florida. Significant flooding potential exists.
Right.
That's it.
So that's kind of the bottom line. The thing that we do know, the things that we do need to kind of start preparing for at this point.
Yeah, the system's name, if it does become a tropical storm, is Debbie. We hope it's not a Debbie Downer.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah.
All right, Brooks, thanks. We'll check back in with Brooks later for a little bit more of our forecast to hear over the next couple of days. But for now, we're going to take a break. We'll be right back with more on Fox 35 News Plus.